Well, I think with Trespass is that we kind of feel is really the first kind of proper Genesis album. The Genesis Revelation stuff was songs we'd kind of written with the original intention of other people doing them, and no one else would do them, and then we sort of modified them a bit so they fit this kind of broad concept we had, and then just recorded them while we almost just left school. Very simple. We never played live or anything, and we just I played mainly piano on it and stuff. By the time we did Trespass, we'd been playing on the road for a few months, and we had a whole, obviously about an hour and a half's worth of material, and we just recorded what we thought were the sort of better ones for Trespass.
From the beginning, we set out as songwriters, and we were sort of quite happy to be writing what were effectively pop songs. But I think there was always inside of us a yearning to explore, to push the boundaries, and to mix styles. And as we started to get a little more adventurous, it got too out of mainstream left field for Jonathan and for the publisher that we were working with then, Joe Roncaroni. And so we sort of parted ways at that point.
From Genesis to Revelation was kind of an album kind of embarked on in a very naive way, but with a huge amount of fun. But I think we always felt that we had a lot of say, despite Jonathan King obviously being the sort of head honcho. I don't think we sort of felt that we were not doing what we wanted to do. Conversely, with Trespass, I don't think we sort of felt suddenly kind of emancipated from some sort of odious yoke in a way, as if this is going to be completely different, because we had a producer, John Anthony. The material was very much dictated by what we'd done on the road. I think if I'm obviously speaking for myself, but I think I remember the feeling with the others that if we'd had more time, we would have actually gone back to some of the music that we'd jettisoned. Because, recorded music is different to live music, but the tendency then, having been on the road, the pressure of the schedule, was to do the music that you were touring with, particularly if it's complex, because there wasn't enough time to rehearse new stuff.
I think in a way the Trespass album was our first album as a band, you know what I mean? Genesis to Revelation was really a bunch of kids in a holiday time, which is fine, and an amazing opportunity, but between that album and Trespass, we'd become a band. We'd done live concerts, we were on the road, we were gigging band, we'd played together, we'd done the cottage era. And I think really, it's a strange album in some ways. The first album we actually ever did, only album we actually ever did, where we played it live before we recorded it, which I wouldn't do again, funny enough. But it's the first album I think that we felt like a band.
Today, the red sky tells his tale, but the only listening eyes are mine.
Stagnation, that was a journey song, as I call it, that you didn't follow the normal verse, chorus sort of structures, but you went on through a series of landscapes, and I think right from the word go, that was something that interested me, and it continues to interest me in sort of stuff that I do. I mean, more often now it's sort of film work than film soundtrack stuff, but I love that, and I think some of my favorite pieces of music are when I, as a listener, get taken into different worlds made out of sound, and if there are some things that you've not encountered before or blends that you haven't met before, then it pays off even better for me.
Tell me my life is about to begin. Tell me that I'm a hero. Promise me all of your violent dreams. Light up your body with anger.
Well, The Knife was a very popular stage song. And we used to construct our set in those early days. One thing we used to start acoustic, and I used to play a lot of guitar. And it would start with first 2 or 3 songs I'd play guitar on, and then with Stagnation would be the first sort of song that had anything else in it. Then of course that song itself develops, starts off with just the guitars, and then the keyboards come in, and there's even an organ solo, and then the whole thing becomes drums and everything comes, and there's a big thing at the end. So, and then The Knife was the kind of final song in the set. And it always got the audience that. They always loved it. It was that sort of the dum rhythm, it was just sort of always, even people who weren't sort of quite sure what we were on about, they heard that and their heads were all going, So it was a key song for us in those early days, and it became very much, I think, for that first sort of year or two we were touring, the key song, the trademark Genesis song.
I'll give you the names of those who must kill, all must die with their children, carry the heads to the palace of old, hang them high, let the blood flow.
Well, The Knife used to be known as The Nice. because we were big fans of the Nice, and I'd sat around. There was an energy. The Nice, you know, people, not many people know much of their work nowadays, but it was what actually drew us into Tony Stratton Smith, and although, you know, Keith Emerson was, you know, associated with some of the sort of more extreme departures of prog rock on the keyboard. And obviously Emerson was a great performer, he used to sort of rock forward and back with the knife. And I was thinking, and there we would be, you know, sitting on stools, twiddling away at 12 strings, you know, and you'd think, you know, where's the balls in this? Let's get something with a bit of energy and a bit of something a little dangerous. So we didn't have anything like that, so I started to try and write something that would have that energy, and that's really how things began.
Looking for someone, I guess I'm doing that.
That was another one that was sort of, you know, felt like a song which I'd brought to the band, and the band had then extended, and it was a sort of soul-influenced piece. But it then went into this sort of folkier journey, and I really was pleased with that mixture.
Trying to find a needle in a haystack, chilly wind, you're piercing like a dagger, it hurts me so.
It was, you know, it was fun to sing. You know, I always liked to try and have, you know, in the different voices I work within, to have a bluesy one, and that was more sort of soul influenced.
In those days, for the first 2 or 3 albums, we had Paul Whitehead, who was a good artist who kind of, at the time, was involved in doing album covers and stuff. And so you kind of, and also there's that nice gatefold sleeve you don't have anymore. So you kind of let him go. I mean, you know, you let someone go away and do something quite, that excites them, and then see what you got. And it looked great with the big sort of knife slash across, I thought.
Well, that was quite a nice idea. We saw the music we'd done. A lot of it was very sort of pretty and romantic music. We had this one song, The Knife, which was anything but, a sort of violent song. So we just pictorially did that. We said to this guy, just draw a fairy drawing and then knife slash through the middle with a knife sticking out the end of it. And that was sort of, I think it's quite good really, because it's deceptive, Genesis, sometimes. You sort of see them as one thing, you know, but in fact there's this other thing going on, right from the early days, I think. And we've always had those two sides to us, sort of, you know, it may vary a little bit really as to how you define them, but the sort of romantic side and the sort of more aggressive side. Well, Trespass was a big advance for us from Genesis Revelation. We'd been playing live for a while, and I think it was the first album where we start to play as a group. You know, we actually know what we're doing, and everything sort of starts to coalesce, really. It's, you know, in its position in the Genesis thing, it was very important. It was a kind of like, because it set the trend, I think, of what was to come later. It's definitely the first of the Genesis albums as people came to know them. And from that point of view, it's very important. I think we still had a bit to learn, and I think one or two of the songs in there, you know, perhaps a little bit slight in comparison with what was to come later. But at its strongest moments, which as I said before, I think Stagnation, I think it's right up there.
I think it was a good start. You know, there was definitely a personality that was different to other bands and prog bands at the time. So it was the first thing, I think, to set us apart. And we had, you know, I think some minor success in Belgium, which felt like conquering the world at the time.
I would think it's sort of a very good early Genesis album. Obviously, there's many better later.
I'd describe it as our first album as a proper band. That's how it felt. We'd become a band and made an album. We haven't heard of it 30 years or 20 years, so actually you go back and you kind of often reevaluate and go, well, that's really quite nice.